Hey everybody, it's Scott and welcome to this week's episode of Strength and Health TV. Sorry I haven't posted anything lately. It's been kind of crazy around the training center here. We're actually getting ready to move locations within the next couple of weeks. So I've just been kind of dealing with getting everything set up at my new space where I'll be going, making preparations to get out of here and just tying up some loose ends. So my time has been pretty busy, so I do apologize for not releasing videos as frequently as I normally do. But hopefully this one will give you some good information and hopefully you enjoy this week. This week I want to talk about something that's come up a lot lately with a lot of the lifters that I train, with some of the athletes that I train, and as well as some of the general health and fitness clients that I have. And what I want to talk about is weak points and strengthening weak points. Now, if you're a fan of strength sports and heavy lifting, you'll know that there are various types of programming out there where some people kind of prescribe to the idea that you just need to focus on training the main lifts or the classical lifts, and really just focusing on perfecting those movements that will help build the strength in those movements. And there's really, if you spend any time working on accessory movements or movements to strengthen those weak points, it's really just a waste of time. And then you know that there's programs out there that actually incorporate a wide variety of movements to help build the main lifts or the classical lifts. Now, this tends to be, more of an issue in strength sports like powerlifting and weightlifting, where you see these debates and these arguments, whereas if you're talking about training a general athlete, the movements that you do really don't matter, because all you're trying to do is make that person stronger, and you're trying to build up the muscles that they need to perform in their sport to help eliminate any weak points, or to help eliminate any weaknesses that they have in some of their sporting forms and things like that. So it's a little bit easier to get away with a wider variety of movements when you're not actually competing in a lifting sport. Now, if you're competing in a lifting sport such as weightlifting or powerlifting, then you're dealing with the classical snatch and clean and jerk. You're dealing with the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. So you do have some proponents that adhere to the fact that just training the classical lifts is all that you need to do, more of a minimalist approach, and eventually the lifts will get better. And the old saying is that if you want to bench more, you need to bench more. And I do believe that that's true to a certain point. You never want to not train the classical lifts, but I find that if one of the movements, or when you get to a point in the classical lifts where you're no longer making progress, then it's usually due to a weak muscle in the chain. To use one of my lifters as an example, she's a female who's got a 200-pound bench in competition. She didn't have that when she started working with me. Her bench was right around 180. And after we actually went up to Westside Barbell to train with Louis Simmons, and all he did was look at her one time and said she needs more front delt work. He watched her bench a couple of times. She made, I think, 180 or 185 at the gym, and then she went up to 200 and it just got stapled with it, wouldn't come off her chest. So he suggested that we work on a lot of push-ups, different types of push-up variations, and then do a lot of direct work for the front delts. By doing so, 6 weeks later at her next competition, she benched a very easy 200 in competition. So here's a weight that stabled her 6 weeks early, and the only thing that we changed was we added a lot of special movements like push-ups, and not that there's anything special about it, it's just a calisthenic, right? And then a lot of direct front delt work. We did various types of front delt raises, seated on an incline bench, plate raises and things like that to help build up the muscle in the front of the shoulder, and she benched that 200 very easily. Now, we weren't doing any more bench presses than we normally do. We usually work the bench very heavy one day, and then we do it for speed and volume on the other day. So we train the bench twice a week, but what we did was shift our focus on accessory exercises to include more work for the front delts, and then that helped her overcome that deficit, and she was able to bench at 200. So I find that strengthening weak points is very, very important. That's why I don't prescribe to any specific program. I really think that you need to learn, if you're an athlete, you need to learn to train yourself, or if you're a coach, you need to learn how to train your athletes based on what they need. And that's why I'm such a proponent of the Westside system. I just like the idea of working on all special strengths on a weekly basis or a weekly microcycle, so that we're always strong, that we're always conditioned, and then we can shift that training to focus on the weak areas, like we did with Amanda's bench press. She needed a little bit more delt work, so that was our main focus after the bench pressing. Some people that need more tricep work, they'll move on and work their triceps and such, but we never leave any muscle groups neglected. We always work the delts, we always work the tris, we always work the lats, always work the biceps, we always do some higher rep dumbbell work and some push-ups and stuff like that for the chest, and to tie it all together. So it's not like you're ever neglecting anything. I mean, it's not like we just worked front delts on Amanda and that was it. We still did the tricep work, but it's just the the delts became the priority. So after our main movements, then we moved on to really start hammering out those weak areas, and we saw huge progress as a result. So I think if you take that approach to all your lifts, it's really important, whether it's the bench, the squat, the deadlift, or the snatch and clean and jerk. Now I know with Olympic weightlifts, I don't want to talk too much about that because I really don't deal a lot with that. I'm a fan of the sport, but I don't coach it, and I'm not very proficient in the lifts. I do know that there's a lot more technique involved, in my opinion, with the snatch and the clean and jerk, just because they're fast lifts, they're very explosive lifts, unlike the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, where they're a little bit more of a grind. With the Olympic lifts, you're really just jumping and throwing the bar and catching them and stuff. It's very explosive. The movements are never done. I shouldn't say the power lifts are done slow, but the Olympic weightlifts are always displayed very, very fast. You can't display them slowly, whereas a squat, if you're at a maximal lift, the lift may look slow even though you're creating a tremendous amount of force to lift the barbell, but it is more of a grind compared to the Olympic lifts. So I do know that technique may be a bigger factor with the Olympic lifts than it is the power lifts, but that's not to say that the power lifts technique should be neglected at all. I do think people do overcomplicate the issue a little bit. I mean, they act like, all you need to do is squat, 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 work on technique. I mean, it is just a squat too. I mean, yeah, the technique is really important, but people overcomplicate this stuff. You don't really need technique practice, 24/7. Once you learn how to squat pretty well, you're not going to forget how to squat. I mean, it's like learning how to ride a bike. We do more complex movements that our body can program. We can program good squat by learning good technique early on and then focusing on building strength through special strength exercises. So we look at the squat and the deadlift, outside of technique, a lot of the areas that break down tend to be the lower back because that just tends to be the weakest part for a lot of people. It's not to say the glutes or hamstrings couldn't be a weak point or the abs. I mean, we want to work on all the muscles that contribute to the movements, but the lower back does tend to be a weak point for a lot of people. I do, and a lot of my power lifters have issues with lower back strength, and then I can, one of the football players that I worked with, this just kind of comes to mind. It was a while back, but he was an outside linebacker from Georgia Southern. Now this guy was big. He came to me, he was weighing about 236, I think, and he came to me for his pro day prep. He was graduating. Georgia Southern had done really well that year, and they were having a pretty big pro day, and it was going to be attended by a lot of scouts. So he came to me to help him prepare for that pro day with only about 6 to 8 weeks to prep for it. Now, he was a big dude. He was about 236, really big thighs, really big, hamstrings, really big chest and shoulders and stuff. And our very first lower body workout we ever did, we were doing some kettlebell swings with the 24 kilo bell, 53-pound kettlebell, and his back locks up. Now, he's got a 535-pound squat at this time. He's only got a 29-inch vertical. His lower back locks up swinging a 53-pound kettlebell. I couldn't, it's like, how does that happen? His lower back was so weak. So we began working on the entire posterior chain with special emphasis on the lower back. We did a lot of back raises. We did a lot of reverse hypers. We did exercises like the glute ham raise or the inverse curl. We did a lot of torso work. We did a lot of abs. We did a lot of obliques. Did a lot of kettlebell swings and kettlebell clean snatches, some of the various kettlebell movements for high reps that I like. And coupled with the ways that we squat and we deadlift and the various squats and pulls that we did, he ended up jumping at his pro day, which was only about 6 or 8 weeks later. He jumped 39.5 inches. So his vertical went from 29, where I tested him, to 39.5 inches in 6 to 8 weeks. Now you would think that that's some, miraculous change and that I should be, packaging some vertical jump training manual. But really all it was his weak lower back. It inhibited his ability into going into extension, going into the jump. So I really believe that he was already capable of jumping higher than, much greater than 30 inches. But the reason he was stuck at 29 was because his back was so weak. That was his limiting factor. So even though his legs might have been capable of a 30+ inch jump, his lower back was keeping him at 29 inches. Now his leg strength did improve during those 6 to 8 weeks. His parallel squat went from 535 to 600 even. So that is a pretty big jump on the squat. But I also attribute that to the stronger back. He might have had legs that were capable of that 600-pound squat, but if his back could only hold that 535, he was going to squat 535. Louis Simmons talks about this stuff extensively. I can't recommend his podcasts, his articles, his books heck, go visit the guy. The guy is a wealth of knowledge. He's my mentor. I've learned so much from the information that he shares freely. You're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't look into it. And with the podcast that he and the people that he works with have been released, and there's just so much good information. But he always likes to say that your weak link in your chain is gonna be what your lift is. So again, with Corey, my outside linebacker, he was squatting 535 and jumping 29 inches. 6 weeks later, he's squatting 600 and he's jumping 39.5 inches. Was that due to an increase in strength and power? Probably a little bit. I mean, 6 to 8 weeks is enough time to get stronger, but we made his lower back a lot stronger, and I really think that that was the key factor that allowed him to display his levels of strength and power, because it wasn't like we were starting from scratch. He was already a strong guy. I just think that weak lower back was inhibiting him. And talking about the lower back, we had to hit it hard with a lot of reps. Now, the lower back is composed of a lot of connective tissue. You know, people talk about, I remember Louis mentioning in a podcast recently, how people talk so much about how the muscles grow stronger than the tendons, but nobody talks about training the tendons and connective tissues. You always hear that tendons and connective tissue respond to really high repetitions, but how many people are actually programming all those really high repetitions in training? I've got a collegiate football player I just started working with. His neck and his lower back are weak as piss. I mean, it's disgusting, like how, for as big and strong as this guy is, for his lower back to be so weak. His first workout, he got through speed squats, and he couldn't even get through speed deads or box jumps. I mean, these are just basic things. You know, it's like, what are they doing out there? So he has really benefited a lot from doing really high repetitions of reverse hypers. Reverse hypers are one of the best exercises that I've ever found for a lower back, and it was developed, created, and patented by Louis, and is a fantastic machine. We've got one here in the gym, and I recommend, if you don't have one, that you do get one, because when you do reverse hypers properly and you implement them with the proper loading, they have a huge impact on your lower back strength. I've seen this with my power lifters. I've seen it to use my power lifter who recently benched 200 pounds after strengthening her delts. One of the things, her squat has gone up from 315 to 320. Now, she's had some knee issues that have been kind of making her squat progress slow, but her deadlift has gone up from about 365 or 370, somewhere around there, up to 400 officially in a meet, because of the lower back work we've been doing. Her lower back was very weak, and she could barely get through some of the reverse hyper workouts when we first started. One, because it's uncomfortable for her, but two, because the lower back couldn't handle the volume. But we've built her volume up high to the point where she's doing about 80 reps with half of her squat, a little over half of her squat max, twice a week. So on our lower body days, that's her volume on the reverse hypers. I actually talk about this in one of my previous videos about the prescription for the reverse hyper and how much weight to do and what the volume is. Now, this, I'm not taking any credit for this. I'm taking this directly from Louis Simmons, the guy that invented the bench. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm taking what an expert, who I believe is one of the top experts in the field, has learned through all the trial and error implementation he's done to build the strongest gym on the planet. If you're not learning from that, again, really you're wasting your time, and you're not taking advantage of some fantastic info that's out there for free. But we've implemented Louis' strategies with our reverse hypers, and I've seen huge improvements in people's squat strength and people's back strength and people's jumping and such. And the lower back's such a weak area for a lot of people. I use a lot of these strategies with my general health and fitness clients. I've got a guy who's been coming in who was referred to me by a physical therapist friend of mine who's got horrible lower back problems, had some minor lower back surgeries, had some of his discs removed, just in a lot of pain, to the point where he was using, he told me in his words, I'm basically living my life in 4-hour segments, because that's when each pain med wears off, then I take my next dose. So he came in, we put him on the reverse hyper with only about 70 pounds on it. I showed him how to do it properly, and I had him start with about 3 to 4 sets of as many reps as he could do. I wanted him to shoot for about 20, 25, but he was at least getting 15. Within a few days, he did notice that he was starting to improve the way his lower back felt, and he was able to reduce his pain med dosages. Now, after about a week and a half, almost a couple of weeks of training, he's coming in almost daily. I shouldn't say daily, but he's really doing at least 3 to 5 times a week. He's coming in, he's hitting the reverse hyper. He's doing about 4 sets on the reverse hyper per session. He's built his weights up to about 180 to 200 pounds that he's able to handle for 4 sets of about 20 to 25 reps. Now, he's doing this, like I said, about 3 to 5 times a week. He told me the other day he couldn't believe how good his back's feeling. His back feels so good, I don't think he uses pain meds anymore. If he does, it's very sporadic at best. But what he led me to believe was he's no longer on pain meds. His physical therapy is improving. He's actually able to do a lot of the torso strengthening exercises, the lower back strengthening exercises that his physical therapist had him do. And the only thing he's doing in here is those 4 sets of reverse hypers 3 to 5 times a week. And he's really built up the weights. He's gone from about 70 pounds up to about 180 to he's got 200 pounds on it right now. He's just in today doing it. So this is not an athlete. This is not a lifter. This is a guy who works from home, who's got really bad lower back, who's now much healthier and much stronger as a result of that bench. So when I hear people talk about, West Side being BS and the West Side methods and exercises don't work, I even remember one strength coach saying, I spent all this money on reverse hypers and glute hams and they didn't do shit. I got rid of them. I don't understand. You're just not implementing it properly, and you're not putting the correct volume and the correct loading into the exercise, because the reverse hyper has been a fantastic piece that everybody that trains here has benefited from. Now again, you've got to work the movement. We're using basically the way I base off my lifters and athletes. We take half the squat, man. This is coming from Louie. We take half of the squat max, and we do 4 sets of between 20 and 25 reps. And some people are even pushing up closer to 30. So we're getting 80 to 100, sometimes 120 reps per workout. That is a huge amount of volume, but again, with the back being mostly connective tissue, you've got to do those high reps. It's the same reason why the high rep pushdowns work for elbow health. It's the same reason why the high rep, band good mornings and things like that are so beneficial for the hips, and the high rep leg curls are so good for the knees. You've got to do those lighter weights and those higher reps to build up the strength and that connective tissue and to bring health to those joints, and the lower back is no different. So we've seen huge improvements. I've got one of my clients who trains with me remotely down in Sarasota, Florida. He had a hard time with the reverse hypers when he was starting out. Now he was deadlifting in the high threes, somewhere in the 365, I think 385 range, somewhere around there. And he was kind of stuck with his deadlift. His glutes and his lower back were horrible. His glutes and his hamstrings were horrible, and his lower back actually wasn't too bad, but he was definitely muscling the deadlift through with his lower back, but he was, lacking some of the integration in the posterior chain muscles. So reverse hypers just kicked his butt. He hated doing them. He bitched and moaned about them when he was starting out with them. But now I've got him up to doing, I think somewhere around 150 pounds is what he's working. Now his free squat has gone up from the mid to high 2s. He's up squatting now 315 is what he recently did, and he definitely had more in the tank based on that test. So his squat's coming along really, really well. So we've got about 100, I have him doing about 150 on the reverse hyper, and I've got him doing 4 to 5 sets of about 15 to 20 reps. So again, we're getting that volume. And he recently broke his deadlift PR of 395. He's pulling in the low 4s now, 405 I think off the floor, and then in the low 4s on some of his special exercises. Now, he doesn't even wear a belt in training. He does this all beltless. You want to talk raw, this guy's totally raw. He doesn't wear wraps, doesn't use a belt, and he was able to raise his deadlift strength dramatically. And the guy's 53, so he's doing really, really well. But he is twice a week hitting those 4 to 5 sets of reverse hypers at about 15 to 20 reps. So he's getting that high volume, close to 100 reps with half of his squat max. People that I know use the reverse hyper, they barely put any weight on it, and they do a couple, 2, maybe 3 sets of 10 to 12 at the end of the workout. How is 20 to 36 reps the same as doing 80 to 100 or 120 reps with half your squat max? It's not. So these special exercises, these weak point exercises, you've got to put the volume in. You've got to make sure the intensity and loading is there if you're going to benefit from them. I mean, we work these exercises hard. My power lifters, we hardly even count sets of reps anymore on a lot of the exercises. We just work and work and work and get that volume in there and really trash the muscle, because these smaller single joint exercises, the muscles recover very, very quickly. We can hammer the triceps after doing some bench work, and then they're ready to go again in another day or two. So we only bench twice a week, and we do lower body work twice a week. So by hammering the triceps, by hammering the lats, the delts, all these smaller single joint or smaller, more hypertrophy exercises, we just do a huge amount of volume, and we just try to raise that volume over time, because in order to get stronger, you got to do more work. So that's how we address weak points in here. It's how I've done it with people who just come to me for general health and fitness. It's how I've done it for my athletes. It's how I've done it for the lifters that I train. But in order to get those weak points stronger, you have got to work the hell out of those weak points. You can't just do a couple sets here and call it a day. It's like the old bodybuilding thing. You see a bodybuilder who has no calves. Typically, they're only doing a couple sets of 15, 20 reps at the end of the workout. But I guarantee if they work their calves with the same amount of intensity and volume that they work their biceps,
their calves would blow up. It's just people don't like training their calves. People don't like training the lower back, and powerlifters, they don't like doing these smaller exercises to help build the bigger ones. But if you do it, it helps to strengthen the body, to strengthen the joints, and to help build the primary movements. So it's not just an issue for lifters. It's not, it's an issue for everybody, whether you're an athlete or whether you're in a general health and fitness. Everybody has got weak points. And I can tell you on my general health and fitness clients, those weak points tend to be the lower back mostly, because they sit a lot. They work at desks, they sit in front of computers, they travel. Their hips are flexed, so their hip flexors are tight. Their lower back's weak. Their head's forward. Their internal rotators are tight. So by doing a lot of stretching and mobility work for those areas, as well as strengthen up the back side of the body, a lot of these guys are feeling better, they're feeling healthier. I've got one client who came to me, couldn't golf for 2 or 3 years. He's a big dude. He weighs mid to high 200s. He's really, really tall. He was an athlete when he was younger. He can't even play golf for like 2 to 3 years because he's in so much back pain. 3 months of training with me, as well as working the reverse hyper like crazy, just once a week. He went and he shot 18. He did really well, but he hadn't played for a couple years, so his score was a little off. But the guy had no back pain. That was the key. He finished 18 holes. He was just planning on going out and testing some drives. He ended up playing 18 holes, and he had no back pain afterwards. So this stuff really isn't rocket science, and it's not that hard to do, but you do have to work those weak points really, really hard and train them like you do want to bring them up. I think it's a big issue for athletes. I think it's a big issue for lifters, and I think it's a big issue for general health and fitness people. So hopefully, this video is giving you a little bit of idea on how I address weak point training. And I hope that it's something that you will take a look at your program and see maybe what's holding back your lifts or your performance or your health and fitness. And you can address those issues by taking this approach that we take to training our weak points in here. So hopefully you found this video helpful and useful. If you've got any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below the video or contact me directly. If you got any suggestions for future topics on the Strength and Health TV, please leave those in the comments section below. And until next time, stay strong, stay healthy, and I hope you enjoyed this week.